Today, we're going to talk about one of the most legendary and, let's be honest, famously difficult books ever written. It's this massive 3-volume beast that really helped shape the 20th century. It's a book a lot of people have heard of, but almost no one has actually read. This is Principia Mathematica.
I mean, just look at it. It feels less like a book and more like some kind of ancient artifact, doesn't it? You can almost feel the weight of the ideas trapped inside. Now, trying to read all 3 volumes from cover to cover, that could literally take years. So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to investigate the book itself, using its own pages as a guide to figure out what the heck it's all about. And that really is the big question, right? Why would 2 absolutely brilliant minds pour a whole decade of their lives into this thing? What were they trying to prove? And why does this kind of serious-looking green book still matter so much in math, philosophy, and even computer science today? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so our first clue is come from the place you'd expect, the dust jacket. You can think of it as the book's mission statement. And let me tell you, it makes some pretty bold claims right from the very beginning.
See? The book really doesn't pull any punches. That very first sentence just sets the stage. It's saying, hey, this isn't just another math textbook. Nope. This is being presented as a foundational pillar of 20th century thought. That is a huge reputation to live up to.
So yeah, all the evidence we really need to get started is right here on these pages. And the minds behind this whole mission? Well, the title page introduces them. Alfred Whitehead and his former student, the famous philosopher Bertrand. These two got together and kicked off one of the most ambitious intellectual projects, well, ever.
So what was this grand ambition? What was the big idea? Luckily for us, the dust jacket tells us exactly what they were trying to pull off. Okay, this is the absolute core of it all. Whitehead and Russell had this radical idea that math wasn't its own separate, mysterious thing. They were convinced it was actually just a very fancy branch of logic. You know, logic being the super basic rules of reasoning, like if A is true, then A is true. Their entire mission was to prove that you could build the whole universe of mathematics from just a few of these simple, unbreakable rules. And that is what made this whole project so groundbreaking. Before Principia Mathematica, people saw math and logic as 2 different fields. Sure, they were related, but separate. This book was the first colossal attempt to prove they were actually the same thing, that math literally grows right out of logic.
But you know, it wasn't just what they were trying to prove that was so wild, it was how they did it. Their plan was to build the entire temple of mathematics, brick by brick, totally from scratch.
Just try to imagine building everything you know about numbers, addition, multiplication, calculus, the whole shebang, without taking anything for granted. That's what they did. They started with the absolute smallest number of self-evident logical statements, or axioms, things so basic you just can't argue with them. Their goal was to assume absolutely nothing. So their blueprint was pretty simple in theory, but just monumental in practice. They took those basic axioms and using only the strict rules of logic, they tried to build all of math. And get this is the famous part. It takes them over 360 pages just to prove that 1 + 1 = 2. Seriously, not because they weren't sure, but because they first had to build the entire logical system to define what 1, plus, and equals even mean in the first place. So, after all that unbelievable effort, did it all matter? Was it worth it? Let's take a look at the book's legacy. That's a pretty powerful claim. Now, a later mathematician named Kurt Gödel came along and showed that no system like this could ever be perfectly complete. But that almost doesn't matter. The attempt by Whitehead and Russell changed everything. It created this new, super rigorous foundation for math that went on to influence philosophy, logic, and even the birth of computer science. And you can see this wasn't just some flash in the pan. The book's influence was incredibly long-lasting. It first came out around 1910, and it was being reprinted for more than half a century. Every single one of those reprints proves that its ideas were still essential, still being argued about and taught in universities all over the world. Which brings us back to the book itself, this incredible piece of work by Whitehead and Russell. It was this massive, monumental effort with one single grand ambition, to prove that every last bit of mathematics could be built from the ground up, using only the tools of pure logic. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question that gets right to the heart of their whole project. If they were right, if all those numbers and equations are just really, really complex ways of stating simple logical rules, then what does that say about the universe? Does it mean that the very structure of reality is, at its core, fundamentally logical? That is the deep philosophical mystery at the center of Principia Mathematica.